We are at Yorktown National Battlefield, and let me tell you, I am excited to be here. The last time I was here was 20 years ago when I was a young man with my family, so I'm really excited to come back with my own family, explore a little bit, and similar to Williamsburg, it's very hot out, so thankfully, because it's such an expansive area with the siege lines and everything, most of it's a driving route. I think they said there's about 16 miles worth of driving route to go with different stops along the way. So we're gonna be doing that today. We'll see what we're able to see and bring you guys some of the history. All right, here in the Visitor Center is the famous Lafayette Cannon. And what makes it so famous, other than the fact that it's here at Yorktown, which is always really neat, is that when General Lafayette revisited the United States in 1824, he recognized this cannon from that dent right there on the back. And as the tradition goes, he actually hugged the cannon. He was so excited to see it. So not only does it have a connection here to Yorktown, as Lafayette does, but they had a reunion in 1824. Which I think is just super neat. And every time I'm by these artillery pieces from either the Civil War or from the Revolutionary War, these larger ones, it always surprises me just the size. But a beautiful piece of artillery here within the Yorktown Battlefield Visitor Center. We're starting over here by the Yorktown Visitor Center, which I recommend stopping at first, not just to get a map of the park so you can kind of understand where to go and what stops to make, but also because they have a lot of incredible artifacts on display in there. It's actually one of only 3 places that has Washington's actual tents. It's here, the Smithsonian, in Philadelphia, so definitely worth checking out. But what's also neat about the Visitor Center is it's located just inside the British defense lines around the town of Yorktown. And over here they have a couple pieces of artillery on display. They also have a mortar. And when you look around, you're going to see a lot of different types of earthworks throughout this whole area and around your drive. And pretty much all of this was reconstructed and rebuilt back in the early 1900s to give us all an idea of where things were and what it would have looked like. So they did a lot of archaeological work to determine the footprint of different earthworks and different redoubts and other things like that. So as we go throughout today, you'll see a lot of reconstructed, again, earthworks and things like that. But by and large, it's where it would have been and what it would have looked like, which makes this a really, really cool experience to drive around, to really take in and understand what took place here in October of 1781. Okay, we're here at one of our first stops as part of the British Inner Line of Defense. And I just wanted to point out, they have these historical tour markers all around to help make sure you're on the right track and you're going in the right order, because they do it in a certain way. That makes sense. But the British Inner Defense Line was pretty important, and when Cornwallis was first fortifying Yorktown, he was not fortifying for a siege. He wasn't expecting to come under siege from a massive French and American army when it began, but once he soon realized that that was the case, he had to really beef up his defenses there. So they have some good signage here. And one of the key components of that inner defense line was the hornwork. And the battlefield's really well marked. Here it says, to your right, the British extended their works outward along the Yorkhampton Road, a principal entrance into Yorktown, which they blocked with this hornwork. It was garrisoned by Colonel Abercrombie's light infantry. Really interesting. And when you look at it on a map, it makes a little more sense, or if you looked at it from an aerial point of view. But it's a really large defensive position, again, that kind of juts out, known as the hornwork. And it was an important component of that inner defense line. So another sign here at the hornwork that just reminds visitors not to walk on these earthworks, to make sure that we can preserve them for future generations. This sign also has a pretty helpful map. Here we are right here, and you can see how the hornwork really jutted out of that British inner defense line. So the visitor center is right in here, and we just came over, and now we're at the hornwork checking that out. And again, plenty of other stops to see here in the British line of defense, as well as the second and first parallels for the American and French armies. All right, the next stop here on the tour is along the first Allied siege line. And this is a reconstructed line of earthworks that replicates a French artillery battery here within the Allied First Siege Line. And one thing I love about Yorktown is that they have all these reconstructed earthworks and redoubts and things to really give you an idea of the scope of this siege. And it seemed to have happened so fast. Things developed really quickly in terms of making the decision to surround Cornwallis here in Yorktown. And I just find how everything developed to be providential. It's just incredible. And check this out. You can actually walk down into these reconstructed earthworks. Again, this was a French battery. It's designed to replicate a French battery. So you can see here, these would have been gun emplacements. Have a piece of artillery here firing off in that direction towards the town of Yorktown. And I think over here they actually have some artillery pieces on display. But man, it's such a nice hot summer day here. Hard to imagine what it would have been like in October of 1781 with artillery flying in both directions and just how chaotic it must have seemed for those days. Yeah, here we go. And I love this. This almost looks like, I'm assuming this is a type of mortar, but it's on like a regular carriage. There we see the year 1777. Very neat. And over here they have another mortar on display. I always thought this was cool. I'm actually not entirely sure the name of this, but it almost looks like a compass, where they would have a track, essentially, and be able to turn the mortar to adjust for where they wanted the shots to land. So it gave them a wider arc of fire. Just so cool. And I apologize in advance. I feel like I'm going to use the word cool and awesome and amazing a lot today. But again, I haven't been here in 20 years. As you all know, I am an American Revolutionary War nerd, so it is just so exciting to be here. And it's almost hard to find the words when you're in a place like Yorktown. Just try to imagine what actually took place here and how important these events were. All right, we're going to go ahead and press on to the next stop. Okay, now we've moved up to the second Allied siege line. And this sign here gives a good visual depiction of how that's playing out. So we have the first Allied siege line with the French battery we just visited. And now we're at the second Allied siege line that they dug closer to Yorktown, again, to make their artillery even more effective and hopefully force the British to surrender, which we know they ultimately did. And here it says you're standing near the left side of the reconstructed second siege line. A large portion of the line, to Cornwallis's consternation, was constructed under the cover of darkness from October 11th to the 12th, 1781. At daybreak, the British saw that their enemy now had them within point-blank artillery range, just 360 yards away. And they also have this interesting little depiction. It says, following this 1762 French military textbook method, in complete silence, 750 soldiers dug the trench. And some of these have trails like this, so you can actually walk through and get an idea. This almost makes me want to like crouch down when I'm going through this so I don't get picked off. This is neat. I don't know if they were doing some sort of event. They have about, I don't know, I'd estimate about 50,000 orange cones over there. I think there's about an orange cone for every soldier that fought here, just about, it looks like. I'm not sure. Oh, this is neat. And this goes on for a while. Again, here we can see different placements where artillery would have been positioned. And wow, what's interesting is you can see the flag flying here, the French flag. There's another one all the way over there. So it looks like they reconstructed a good portion of this second siege line. And off in that direction is the town of Yorktown. Okay, off there in the distance, I don't know if you can see the white flag. Let's see if I can line my finger right about here. That's the reconstructed French battery we were at a bit ago. And right over here is the other portion of reconstructed earthworks as part of the second Allied siege line. It is pretty impressive how extensive some of these reconstructed earthworks are. And to me, what's even more impressive and interesting is the archaeological work that's been done to determine the site and the size and the length and just generally the scope of these siege lines and the British defense lines. There you go, that's a cool view. And there's also trails that go throughout various parts of the park. So for some reason, you really feel like walking a lot. You don't necessarily have to drive everywhere, but you'll get some steps in, that's for sure. Yeah, man, check this out. These go all the way back there along the tree line, and you can see another flag there off in the distance. Okay, now we're moving a little bit closer to the British position. Here, these low earthworks we see on either side of this small bridge were part of a French and American advance line. Now, this advance line didn't get finished until the capture of redoubts 9 and 10, which I'm really excited to go see. Both reconstructed, but both just really a crucial and important part of what took place here at Yorktown. And here we are at redoubt number 9. Which on the night of October 14th, 1781, was captured by the French. Concurrently, the Americans stormed and captured redoubt number 10. And they have this really nice tablet commemorating the French soldiers and sailors who gave their lives for American freedom, particularly here at redoubt number 9. And this is just so incredible to see a reconstructed redoubt number 9. And it just gives you an idea of how difficult it must have been to attack and to capture a site like this. You had this deep trench. It's a little overgrown today, but you can kind of get an idea of how you'd have to basically scramble through this trench, somehow climb up this nearly vertical wall and get through this abattis, which is sharply sticking out of the redoubt. And by the way, you're probably getting shot at or stabbed at all the while. So really incredible. And this is a fully reconstructed redoubt, the full size of it. So it is a good, sizable defensive earthwork. And I don't know, just really cool to see this here. And here's the sign for redoubt number 9. Talks about how on October 14th, the French attacked redoubt 9, which was defended by approximately 120 British and German forces. So again, just try to imagine what that would have been like storming across the fields from off in that direction over here to capture redoubt number 9. And then concurrently all the way over there, right along the side of the York River, which is the far left of the British outer defenses here, you had redoubt number 10, which was captured by Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Hamilton and his men. So because this is a fully reconstructed redoubt, you can actually walk into it, again, and really get an idea of what this would have been like. Looks like those trails going up on top of the, I guess that's called a parapet, right? That's closed. You can come inside it and really get an idea the size of this thing. I don't know, 120 men in here. Seems like that'd be kind of cramped. But I guess generally, if you're trying to defend nearly 360, or at least in mostly the direction that the French and the Americans would likely come from, you would need all those men. Now, this is really cool. And come back up over here. What I really like is they got the French flag flying over here. Or a French flag, I should say. Look at that. Just imagine storming across these fields towards these redoubts at night. It's just amazing. All right, we're going to go ahead and head over to see redoubt number 10. And if you are a fan of the musical Hamilton, you may already know that on the night of October 14th, 1781, Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Hamilton led a group of men against redoubt number 10. And he finally got that military experience and that military glory he so craved, seemingly. And Marquis de Lafayette led soldiers against redoubt 9 at the same time. So really, really fascinating. And one thing I want to mention with these reconstructed redoubts and reconstructed earthworks, obviously the land and geography and things have just changed a lot over time. Because after the siege, life had to go back to normal as best that it could. So a lot of these earthworks were just leveled and turned back into farm fields or whatever. So that's why all of these are reconstructed and there's really no earthworks left from the battle. And here we are at redoubt number 10. And even though this is a reconstruction, it is just so neat to be standing here and to look at this and get an idea of what it might have looked like and try to imagine a young Lieutenant Colonel Hamilton and his soldiers with bayonets fixed and muskets unloaded storming across the field at night, trying to unseat the British from this really critical defensive position on their left side here near the York River. It's just so incredible to try to imagine that. And today they have some really neat stuff. They have this tablet in the stone to commemorate the event. And here on the tablet it reads, Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Hamilton, with unloaded muskets and fixed bayonets, scaled the parapets and gallantly captured redoubt number 10, which formed the extreme left outlying defense of the British, and so hastened the surrender of Yorktown and the last fighting of the troops of General George Washington. And this tablet was put into place in 1925. And then they also have a National Park Service sign here. It talks about how the Marquis de Lafayette selected the light infantry companies from his Continental Army Division to carry out the American attack on Redoubt 10. Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Hamilton led the assaulting force of 400 Americans against the 70 British defenders. And incredible. Just try to imagine this. And there's a depiction of Alexander Hamilton there at Yorktown. But just so cool to see this. And another thing, I'm not sure if you're able to see it on camera, but right through these trees, you can see the York River. And again, the coastline has changed a little bit. So redoubt number 10 is actually not a fully reconstructed redoubt. You can't really tell from here and you can't get over there because of the fence. But if you look off to the side, it just kind of tapers off there. So this is not a fully reconstructed redoubt because there's not enough land. There's not enough room to reconstruct it because of the changes in the coastline here by the York River over the past 250 years. So something to keep in mind here when you're walking around Yorktown is that some things they do the best they can to reconstruct it and give you an idea. And here at Redoubt 10, they do that. And it's just so cool to be visiting here. All right, now we're over here at the historic Moore House. And to me, this is probably one of the most fascinating historic structures anywhere in this area. And it was in this house that the surrender negotiations took place, which ultimately led to the surrender of the British Army under General Cornwallis. And they also have a nice sign here that gives some more of the details. On October 18th, 1781, after over 8 days of continual bombardment, the battlefield was finally tranquil. Washington and Cornwallis now focused on the surrender negotiations taking place at this house, the home of Augustine Moore. And it's an important note, I think some people might think that Cornwallis and Washington actually met in person. But as you can see here, it was actually some lower level officers. It says each general had selected 2 officers to handle the face-to-face discussions. So it wasn't like you had the main generals or even generals at all. It was these younger officers, which I find is really just fascinating. One of them for the Americans being Lieutenant Colonel John Lawrence. So very neat. But the Moore House here has been here since the mid-1700s. And like I said, is such a historic and important structure, and really, really beautiful. And I remember reading that the reason they likely chose the Moore House to conduct these negotiations is because they were well outside the town of Yorktown, which for Cornwallis would probably mean that even during the negotiations, it definitely would be a cessation of hostilities because you needed to ensure that everybody could safely get over here and carry out negotiations. But also because the Moore House was virtually untouched from the siege. So of course they knew it was a home that they could go and utilize for these negotiations. But an absolutely beautiful home. It is managed by the National Park Service, though I do not believe that it's open today. But either way, it's just cool to be able to be here on the grounds and see this house finally. It's kind of funny, I was telling my wife as we're driving around, when I was here 20 years ago, as a 15-year-old lad, most of these sites we were not able to see, probably because of me and my sister and who knows what else, but you can only take so much driving around some of these places as kids. But finally getting to come back here and see places like the Moore House and Redoubts 9 and 10, and some of these sites I didn't really get to take in, or if I did, I don't really remember them. It's just really special to be here. So very neat to finally see the Moore House where the surrender negotiations took place, which ultimately led to the surrender of the British Army. We're now walking up to arguably one of the most important fields in all of America, and that is Surrender Field. For this is where the British formally surrendered to the combined French and American forces on October 19th, 1781. And this, right through here, is Surrender Field. On October 19th, 1781, General Lord Cornwallis's British army that was held up in Yorktown formally surrendered to combined French and American forces right here in this field. They marched out and grounded their arms in front of the American line. And many of the British soldiers purportedly actually threw down their weapons as hard as they could in an attempt to break them. A little bit out of spite, perhaps anger, also not wanting the Americans to have use of the weapons, maybe a combination of all those things. But it's just so powerful to be standing here looking out over this field and just trying to picture thousands and thousands of French troops, Americans, the British marching out. It's just a scene that's almost hard to even picture. And if you've ever watched the TV show Turn, they do a depiction of that surrender, which is pretty good. Gives you an idea of how it might have looked. And one big thing that came out of the surrender that I think is just so telling and quite interesting is that British General Cornwallis feigned illness and did not attend the surrender ceremony. So he sent his second, General Charles O'Hara, and when they went to hand the sword, the surrender sword, to General Rochambeau of the French army, he gestured in General Washington's direction, basically saying, no, this was an American victory. And when he turned to General Washington gestured to General Benjamin Lincoln, and General Benjamin Lincoln accepted the surrender sword to ultimately end the siege of Yorktown and get us one major step closer to achieving victory and independence. Man, I've actually never been to this site before, so getting to stand here for the first time is just remarkable. And if you come down here beneath the overlook, they have a really cool wall that you get to walk by that are showing different trophies of war. Now, this is one of the coolest things here at Yorktown. This is a row of guns, howitzers, mortars, just different pieces of artillery that were captured when the British surrendered. And these are considered trophies of war. And in George Washington's official report to the Continental Congress, they accounted for 244 artillery pieces in all, which is just absolutely incredible. And this is just so neat. One thing, if you look closely, a lot of these are inscribed with words such as surrendered by the capitulation of Yorktown, 19 October, 1781. And we see the same thing here on this mortar. Wow. This is too neat. And these are just some of those 244 artillery pieces that the Americans acquired after the British surrendered here at Yorktown. Of course, I couldn't leave without actually walking down to Surrender Field and taking a closer look. Here we have another sign titled, "In Solemn Step." On October 19th, 1781, the now paved road on your right was lined by American soldiers on the right and French soldiers on the left. Every eye was trained upon the arrival of the British troops. Spectators from miles around crowded behind the military formation in anticipation of the British parade. Washington had ordered Cornwallis to march his men from Yorktown at precisely 2 p.m., but unforeseen delays held their exit until 3 p.m. Cornwallis sent word that he was ill and appointed Brigadier General Charles O'Hara to lead his troops, which we talked about a bit ago. In solemn step, with arms shouldered and colors cased, the British and German prisoners marched with drums beating to this field, where they surrendered their weapons. The victors and the defeated were unaware that the long struggle had ended. All right, it has been an amazing day exploring the Yorktown battlefield, and I'm so thankful they've built it back up and reconstructed all these earthworks and redoubts, because it really gives you an idea of how large of a siege this was. And it was such an important event. And although it didn't actually end the Revolutionary War, it in many ways effectively did. You know, the British war effort essentially grounded to a halt beyond that, although the war didn't officially end until 1783. But such a remarkable place to visit. It was very hot today. I think it was 94 at one point. So if you haven't noticed, I actually sweat through my ball cap. This is a different one, but that's the kind of level of temperatures and circumstances we were dealing with today. But really, really thankful to come here. There are a lot more stops. We actually didn't get to stop here for the video. So if you get a chance to come through, I implore you, drive around. Definitely give yourself at least a day if you want to see the whole battlefield and the town of Yorktown. I mean, you could probably spend a couple days here, to be honest with you, and I recommend doing so, or maybe making a couple different trips if you can. But either way, had an awesome time. We learned a lot, and I hope you guys enjoyed coming along with us. That's going to be it for this one. Now it's on to the next journey.